Hey, this is Allan McKay. I'm speaking with Nicolas Burtnyk and Rob Slater from Redshift, the developers of the amazing Redshift GPU renderer. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Allan McKay podcast. Allan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Allan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Allan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on allanmckay.com.
Hi, this is Allan McKay. Welcome to episode 106. I'm speaking with the guys from Redshift, the amazing GPU renderer, which has been taking the industry by storm. So before we get into it all, a couple of announcements I figure I might get ahead of and just quickly bring up. The big one, which I think is going to be really interesting, I've been working very closely with my team for the past couple of months with the one goal that we'll always keep having is how do we free up more of Allan's time? How do we have less on his plate? And that's become a common reoccurring theme is where I can free up more of my time to focus on the bigger, more important things. And I had this brilliant idea of how one episode per week of the podcast is still a lot of work to put together. I thought that would be really cool to free up more of my time. How about I start doing 3 episodes of the podcast per week, which is completely counterintuitive. But I've got something in mind which I've been working bit by bit towards, and I'm really excited about this. So I'm going to try this out throughout December, which is moving forward. If December works out well, if you enjoy this and you want to see more of it, what I'm going to start doing is theming the months. So every single month, all of us together can tackle one particular subject. All of the episodes are going to go into that particular subject. So I'm still going to be doing weekly interview episodes, but then there'll be a lot of solo episodes specifically around that one thing. So for instance, if I were to tackle branding, which is such a massive subject, I would be devoting an entire month to it. And that means that all of us could actually go through that together. And hopefully down the line, it can start to build a bit of a community and start to be something that you're not alone in. As you tackle that, all of us will be going through it. All of us will be able to push each other, motivate each other if we hit those walls. And just be able to progress through all at that given time. Plus, if there is a specific subject that you want to learn about, there's going to be a wealth of that. Rather than it being, check out episode 57, check out episode 28. It'll be an entire set of episodes dedicated around that. So every single month, we'll be tackling an entire subject, and every week will be 2 episodes specifically on that subject. Okay. On top of that, and this is where it's going to get even more ambitious, I'm hoping to be putting out a lot of video content specifically about that as well. And we'll be putting out a small free book that you'll be able to download on that subject too. So not only will you get 3 episodes per week, but every single month they'll be tailored around a specific journey that I want you to take and for all of us to be able to go through that together. I think that will be really powerful as we go through everything from networking to branding to really be able to position yourself as an expert in the industry, or how to build a business or set up your side hustle, how to make money, all of these different subjects that we can begin to tackle. And on top of that, have a lot of videos around it, as well as a guide, which you'll be able to download, like a small ebook, all of these different things. So it's definitely a lot, and I'm more just trying it out throughout December, and that way I can gauge how much of a workload it is, as well as whether this is something that you find beneficial as well. So I think this is really critical for you to communicate whether or not this is something that you want, and at the same time, as we go through it, whether it's something that you find you're getting a lot of success with. Because for me, I'm happy to put my time in where I can to whatever's the most beneficial. And even with the podcast, that was the goal from the beginning, to put out 6 episodes. And if it worked really well, and if I enjoyed doing it, and if it was a success, I would continue to do it. Otherwise, I have no problem stating something as a failure and learning from that and moving on to the next thing. So that's exactly it. With this, I want to see if it works, how it works, and from there we can decide whether or not to do more of it. But I do love the idea, and I think that in a way it allows us all to have that full immersion, which I think is really critical when learning a subject, is to have that total immersion in a subject where you're able to absorb information in every direction that you turn, and that way you can really accelerate that learning through that process. So this will be really interesting. This will be starting officially on the 1st of December, which isn't that far away. And that will be the first episode of many that will go out throughout that entire month. And I figured this would be a great way for us to kind of unite together and be able to tackle a lot of this content matter all together. And yeah, it's going to be really fun. Now, that being said, on top of this, I'm planning for early December to do a new career intensive, as well as possibly a portfolio review. So I'm trying to schedule that stuff at the moment. If you want to be a part of that, just make sure you're on my Inner Circle email list, and that's just my private email list where you get access to a lot of content that isn't available anywhere else on the web. And in addition to that, I've got some brand new training coming out in about a week from now. So I'm looking at around November 28th for that to go live, which will be the same day that episode 107 comes out. And if you want to get access to that ahead of anyone else, before I publicly put it out, you'll be able to get that and a lot of exclusive additional stuff by joining the Inner Circle. So if you want to do all that, simply go to allanmckay.com/inside and you'll be able to sign up. It's free. And from there, you'll be able to get access to the new free training, which we'll be putting out on November 28th, as well as get notified about the private career intensive and the real review that we'll be doing pretty soon as well. So that is it for now. Let's get into this episode. I'm currently chatting with Nicolas Burtnyk and Rob Slater from Redshift. Let's dive in. Do you mind quickly introducing yourselves?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Nicolas Burtnyk. I'm one of the co-founders of Redshift. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And what about you, Rob?
And I'm Rob Slater. I'm also a co-founder, and I'm one of the VP of engineering at Redshift.
That's awesome. And one of you guys is MIA right now?
No, he's sat right behind us, but he doesn't want to talk today.
No worries. I understand. No, it's cool, guys. And yeah, I mean, do you guys want to quickly just give in a nutshell, like, what is Redshift, and what are some of the cool projects that have been using Redshift more recently?
Yeah. So Redshift is a biased production quality renderer. So that means that we have the kind of similar kind of feature sets as V-Ray and Arnold, but we use GPU to accelerate like ray tracing, shading, texturing, all the heavy lifting basically, so that consequently we're about 5 to 10 times faster than CPU renderers.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And what studios typically are using Redshift at the moment? Obviously, Digital Domain, I know, has been kind of diving into it a bit.
Yeah, probably the most well-known is, I would say, is Blizzard Entertainment. I mean, they're using Redshift for their Overwatch cinematics, really nice cinematics, really heavy scenes, pushes Redshift really hard. And I believe they're using Redshift for their Hearthstone cinematics as well. You can see all these on YouTube.
Cool. That's awesome. And I guess it's a bit inconvenient having them just down the street from you guys. They can always come knock on your door for feature requests.
Yeah, well, that has been happening, but it helps us kind of expand our features. If a big company comes knocking on our door saying they need X, Y, and Z, then it's very likely that other people are going to want to need those features as well. So we typically add them.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I found whenever I've been on productions where we collaborated with a software company, it's always been really great, both obviously in production, having the attention of software developers to implement a lot of the features of what we need while we're in production. But at the same time, I've just noticed a lot of software companies, the major growth they get is usually when they are helping out on a production. And recently I interviewed Cebus, who makes Thinking Particles and a lot of Final Renders, the renderer they develop, and Mosquito as well, I guess. And yeah, I mean, there's a few movies where we collaborated with them, and 2012 was a really big one where no one really had a good solution for creating all the destruction. So they were kind of custom developing everything. And again, I find that having, that kind of collaboration between two companies, it really works well. You get so much growth in such a small amount of time, just because you're kind of in the trenches together, trying to find solutions to a lot of things, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I would say that it's kind of, for us, it's a very organic process, because we're talking to our customers and like potential customers all the time, and we listen, and we monitor the forums, and basically if we see something like features that are really popular, then that kind of like drives our development strategies.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. It's really cool. And I don't know, like, just kind of going back a bit, like, how do you guys all know each other?
Well, we all used to work for the same games company. So Panos and I, he's also a co-founder. We used to work in the UK for many years. We were basically part of core rendering technology for a games company in England. And then I moved here, and we met Nick, and we're all part of the same kind of like a core rendering technology team. And then, we had the idea of Redshift because an artist friend of ours who we were working with sort of asked the question, why, we're doing real-time rendering for video games, it looks pretty good. GPUs are really powerful. Why has nobody tried to accelerate ray tracing, for final frame rendering? And, so we sat down together and we were like, well, because it's really hard. That was the conclusion that we came to, because no one had done it before, basically. And but then, we're kind of like a challenge, and we thought we would see if we could knock up a prototype to see if it was even possible. And very early on, we found out that, it looked like it was actually possible. So that really encouraged us to take this seriously. And basically, that's how Redshift started.
That's cool. And so is that essentially the origin story? I'm sure there's some beers involved somewhere along the way, but...
Man, there are beers, heroes, wild women, all those things, man.
Well, you are in Orange County, which every time I go down there, there's always some kind of drama.
Yeah, actually, it's not that wild in Orange County.
I don't know.
Maybe I should have said it was LA where we started. I don't know.
That's right. It was Hollywood. You're going crazy on Sunset Boulevard, and in between hanging out with celebrities and doing wild nights. You came up with that idea. So
OC Housewives, man.
I know, right? Yeah, I was just saying how one of my friends, she lives down there, and one by one, she's like, spotting them popping up everywhere at all the restaurants. So I don't know. I guess, it's a small community, which is kind of makes it a whole different vibe. But I guess like for you guys to do that, was it? And again, I'm just kind of always curious about how ideas kind of spawn. And so was this something that you guys decided that you were going to go? I'll use English here and say balls in, or was it just more kind of dabbling on the side until you had that kind of realization, like, oh shit, we've got something cool here, like let's really invest in this?
Well, it was dabbling on the side, basically, just to see if it was even feasible as an idea. And then, like I said, I mean, once we, like, our first prototype was super basic. We had like a 640 by 480 fully ray traced, very simple scene, because we're programmers, we're not artists, and we had like ray trace shadows that were textured and everything, and that was running at like 30 frames a second. And in my eyes at the time, at least, that was like quite impressive. And we kind of realized that we could probably have something pretty special on our hands. And I think it was at that point that we went balls deep, as you say.
Sorry, sorry, go ahead.
Just to put some perspective on that, like that was a good, I don't know, 8 years ago. So the technology has improved drastically since then. But we're talking about very, very early old generation GPUs getting that kind of performance that Rob mentioned. It was pretty impressive.
Basically pre-CUDA.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get into the tech side pretty soon too, because I'd love to talk about CUDA in general. And I guess like what were some of the big hurdles in the beginning? Because again, I think a lot of us don't really get to think about like the fact that you are kind of going down a new avenue that most people have traditionally been stuck with CPU and not really thinking about like the ways to innovate and pioneer some of the new ways to approach all this. And I think everything's going GPU these days. So for you guys at the time, like what were some of the big kind of hurdles you had to overcome?
I mean, there was a ton, really. Basically, for a start, we had to think about parallel programming. So we had to think, like, because a GPU does so many operations at once, all the kind of algorithms that you traditionally use for ray tracing and so on, we had to like rethink them so that they would actually fit on the GPU and actually execute well. Because if you don't do it right, you can probably get worse performance. than you would with a really good CPU renderer. So this was something that we had to think about like long and hard, make sure that we got it right. We also had to think about like the data footprint as well. How can we take a scene and like make it fit? Back then, for example, we're talking about 500 megs of memory was like probably the maximum. Make like decent sized scenes fit in that memory, and this includes textures, geometry, and the memory for the rays as well. So texture compression was something that we had to think about very early on, and we also had to basically Redshift was written with out of core rendering in mind from the very beginning. And what that means is that you could take any size scene like gigabytes or gigabytes of textures, and it doesn't matter how much memory the GPU actually has, like physically, you'd still be able to render that scene and it wouldn't crash. So that was like a challenge as well. And then, like I said, the flexibility, how can we get all these great features, completely flexible shader graphs, tons of stuff, that basically CPU renderers already supported, and we had to basically figure out how to cram all those things on the GPU and make it, blazingly fast.
Yeah. And I guess when was it you guys kind of realized you had something like, and what was it like in the beginning? I imagine with any new area where you're going to have to prove yourself, it's going to be a lot of work to kind of get established, get up and running, and make a splash in the market. Especially like going back even 5 or 8 years ago, the rendering market was very competitive even back then. So what was that like for you guys?
Nick, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, so one challenge was the fact that we were sort of experts in a bit of a different space. Like we were working in games, and so while the team had the expertise regarding the GPU, knowing the GPU super well, knowing how to take advantage of all its power, we didn't necessarily completely understand the space of offline rendering or final frame rendering in detail. You think what people are going to want and stuff like that, but then when you actually sort of release your product and it's actually being used in production, all kinds of things that you never even imagined come up. Rob sort of touched on, the number of features. There's an insane number of features in a program like Maya that you need to support. And then there's all kinds of obscure pipelines and workflows that can be even unique to a particular studio. And so sort of wrapping our heads around those, learning those, and distilling those down into like a workable set of tasks that we could address was a challenge. In terms of like how we approached, going to market, we knew we had something special. We knew we had something unique. We didn't necessarily have the biz dev resources to go and install ourselves in a well-known studio from the beginning. So we actually released the product by just sort of announcing ourselves on a number of forums and stuff like that, like CG Talk, and I think like the 3D Pro mailing list and the Softimage mailing list. And actually our first version was only integrated into Softimage. And while, in the end, that was, maybe not a great thing given the demise of the product, I think at the beginning it helped because it was like a very focused community that actually didn't have a whole lot of other options in terms of rendering. And so I think, that really, that community was very technical too, and sort of didn't have a lot of inertia to fight against. A lot of these people were sort of small shops or even freelancers. And so they were sort of willing to take the risks to take on a new product. And they saw the performance, but, it's not only about performance. You also have to like get your job done. And so if the product doesn't actually support what you need, it doesn't matter how fast it is. And so we were able to get into these customers that were willing to take those risks and then work with them to sort of develop the product into a production ready renderer. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's really cool. And yeah, I completely agree. I think that having a single focused package at a time, like in the very beginning, is important, because I've seen some companies in other areas try to support everything from the beginning, and you're essentially fighting too many battles at any given time. And you look at, like, let's say V-Ray, a lot of the renderers these days came from 3ds Max, at the time, and it's more later they kind of evolved into other packages. And same thing with Softimage. I mean, going back to the SGI days, like it was definitely Mental Ray was, you know, the renderer, the high-end renderer that people would typically adopt. So yeah, bit by bit, they've kind of been left in the cold for quite a while before what was it, 2014 when it finally all closed up. But that's cool, like having, I guess, a single audience initially and kind of growing from there. I didn't catch on to Redshift until our mutual friend Alf Laval. You know, we did a podcast episode 39, and yeah, just kind of seeing what he'd been doing, you know, and the fact there was one person doing an entire short film on one computer just with multiple cards. I initially went out and bought a bunch of Titans, which the 1080s came out like right afterwards, so I was pissed about that. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's just so inspiring, kind of like, it's a huge mindset shift from, like, I've worked on plenty of short films, like Blur Studio, we used to knock out a lot of shorts, like In the Rough, Go for Broke, and a lot of other ones. And, you know, you would have an entire studio's render farm at your disposal, and it still wasn't enough. And then here it is, like one person, like one filmmaker, one computer, and you're able to like do whatever you want. And I think that for me, that just instantly showed like a major shift in terms of how or what limitations we're going to have in the future. And GPU just like kind of frees up so much to be able to do what we want to do rather than what we're limited to being able to do. So yeah, for me, that was very inspiring, kind of seeing that capability and being able to allow anyone to have that freedom to do it. Yeah. So actually, I'm curious about that. Like, talking about Alf for a minute, but like for you guys, like, what was your first impression seeing like him pop up on the radar using your tools and what he was doing?
It was great, man. I mean, that was like pretty early days for us as well, I think. Because you know, we were making the renderer, and slowly and steadily artwork started to come in, you know, from our like alpha testers and beta testers and our first customers. So it was exciting seeing that, and, you know, seeing what people are creating with our renderer. And then when Alf's thing came along, it was like the maddest thing we'd ever seen. It was fantastic, you know.
Yeah, like, it was really inspiring. And actually, I'm just trying to think, did he give you a bottle of that Norwegian alcohol when we all caught up? Because he gave me.
Yes, he did.
Did you ever try it? I had like one sip.
Of course I did.
He told me, he's like, this stuff's disgusting, but I had to give you some. And it was like the grossest. I had one sip, and I you know, kindly put it on my alcohol cabinet for quite a while, but yeah, it's just been collecting dust. So.
No, man, you need to spend more time in colder parts of the world. It's appreciated.
I've done my fair share in Finland and a few other surrounding areas, but yeah, Norway not so much, and he hasn't really motivated me to go there for the quality alcohol. So I'll say that much. But no, that's cool. And like, have you found like any other people kind of popping up on your radar using your tools that have been doing some really amazing things with it?
Yeah, I mean, loads.
Yeah, well, there's the Shirkoa short film that's winning all kinds of awards. It's done in like a painterly style, non-photorealistic style, and that's also, I'm not sure if it was, I don't think it was just one guy, but it was a very small team, you know, small handful, and
he did that in his own time, basically. He didn't just and you know, I think he took his time with it too. I think, was he one of the beta testers as well?
Yeah, and I think it took him a good like 2 years to finish that. Wow. But he's killing it on the festivals. Yeah, the festival circuit. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. That's really cool. And yeah, I guess like just for anyone who isn't too familiar, what are some of the big advantages these days with GPU over CPU?
So I mean, mostly comes down to speed, but speed doesn't only mean, okay, I get faster renderers out of the farm, and so I save money. So, but that, I mean, so that's one big thing, is you save money, right? The faster it is, the less hardware you need to do the same amount of work. A more subtle but possibly more important side effect of that is that it improves iteration time. And so, you know, the faster your renders come out, the more you can experiment, and the more artistic you can be. You know, you can try different things and ultimately end up with better results because you've been able to iterate on your work. So those are really like the two sort of main advantages of that you get out of the speed that GPU rendering gives you.
Yeah, and you know, like sort of like small shops and like freelancers, they now have the power of a small render farm, you know, at their fingertips. So now they can compete maybe with like larger shops, for the same, for less money, basically. All I have to do is to get a Titan, and away they go.
I think that is like one of the key things that I found, especially like I worked a lot with Atomic Fiction, who were kind of the poster boy for cloud rendering, and that was a big mindset shift where rather than usually on a project, like I've been on so many projects where you're kind of a victim of your own success, where you start doing really well, the studios give you more and more work, and suddenly you get an additional 500 shots at your studio, and it's like, great, well, we just need to buy more seats and more butts to put in those seats, and we'll get to work. And they don't think about the fact that you have that overhead of electricity, let's say, or physical space in your office, all these different things, air conditioning, obviously software licenses, hardware, all that stuff as well. And a lot of that gets overlooked, and those are the things that are going to cripple you when you're suddenly out of electricity and you need to get a generator just to function at your studio, or what do you do afterwards when you finish all the shots and you bought all this additional power that now is becoming redundant. So I think also just the fact that like nothing is more expensive than man hours. Like an artist might cost $50 an hour, $100 an hour, and if you're sitting there waiting for revisions and iterations to render on the farm, that's when you multiply that by 20 artists, that is so much more expensive than any hardware or anything else. So having that real-time feedback, it just is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. And you mentioned the electricity thing. I mean, one of the cool things about these GPUs is that NVIDIA is cranking out like new architectures every year, and those things are both more efficient and faster. So it's just such an amazing thing, because you don't have to like grow your render farm, necessarily. You just get better hardware.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to talk about CUDA in a moment, but like that's one thing at ILM that I found really interesting is a few of the IT guys were discussing this with me when they first started moving more to GPU, but that was one of the big things for them, was that typically when you buy these super fast CPUs, they become redundant quite quickly because new stuff comes in, new demands come in, and usually they get old very quickly. Whereas with a GPU, you initially buy it for a high-end thing, like let's say doing simulations like they do with Plume and all their water sims as well, and then at some point you're going to go and upgrade to a newer video card, whereas that video card can still be handed down to someone in a different department and take full advantage of it. So suddenly it becomes like this very efficient way of recycling the GPU hardware much more efficiently than CPUs could ever be handed around within the studio. Yeah,
well, and the other thing is, in general, it's a lot easier to replace a GPU than a CPU. When you replace a CPU, you're generally looking at replacing the whole machine because the socket's going to be different. So you need a new motherboard and you might need new RAM and so on and so on. Whereas a GPU is generally just a drop-in replacement. So you just get a new one, and you keep the same case and motherboard and power supply and all that good stuff, and your machine is twice as fast for rendering. Actually, I'm pretty illiterate when it comes to the latest and greatest hardware. So like with some of the external GPU accelerator boxes, I don't know the official term for it, but I'm talking about, where you can buy the external video cards these days. Have you guys found that that's a really beneficial feature people are taking advantage of as well? It's a bit hit and miss. Like the hardware isn't always super high quality, and
what was that one that we tested, man? That was actually pretty good.
The Cubics.
Yeah. Surprisingly low latency, man.
So is that with a Q or a C?
It's CUBIX, I believe.
Cool. I wasn't sure if they're trying to get fancy. Okay, cool.
So I mean that one did work. It performed extremely well. The price is rather high, so it's not totally clear whether it's a win rather than just getting a second machine, for example. So anyways, yeah, with these external boxes, it's a bit hit and miss. What it does help a lot with is on systems that don't necessarily have CUDA-enabled GPUs on board, particularly like laptops, like or Macintosh computers, or Macintosh Apple Macs. So those external boxes, you can suddenly add CUDA-enabled GPUs onto systems that wouldn't otherwise have those available.
That's cool. And I guess when CUDA got implemented by NVIDIA, like how much did that change things for you guys and for everyone? I mean, has it been a pretty big breakthrough in terms of how you guys work with GPU?
Yeah, I mean, totally. So our very first prototype was using DirectX, DirectX 9, which is very old. And then, but it has so many limitations to what you could do. And then with CUDA, I mean, without going into too much detail, because I could talk forever about this, but it opened so many opportunities to how we could write this thing. Just the ability, just how we can access memory, for example. That was like the number one thing that was like so important. Gave us so many different options. How we can synchronize things, or tons of cool tricks you can do. So yeah, CUDA changed everything. In fact, to be honest, probably without CUDA, I don't think we would have made Redshift. And if we had, it would have been a very different product.
Wow. And feel free, by the way, to go in depth. Like most listeners on here are very, very technical. So, I mean, if you want to elaborate a bit on what CUDA is and how it's benefited you guys, yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Well, yeah, like I said, man, mostly it was about how you can access memory. Being able to access memory in like a non-coalesced fashion, reading and writing from anywhere at any time, just gives you like huge amount of flexibility. There was also other things like being able to read data through texture cache. That's nice and fast as well. So what if you want to like read data that you're not actually going to write to, you can use these features. Synchronization primitives for doing sneaky tricks. I don't want to go into too much detail, because a bit of a secret sauce. But yeah, man, I mean, like CUDA is a great language, man. Very flexible, very, very, very good.
That's cool. And I'm just curious too, like have you guys, what are your thoughts, I guess, on, let's say, V-Ray and a few of the other renderers starting to look at doing hybrid GPU and CPU together? Like, are you a fan of that, or what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, we saw Panos and I saw the presentation actually at GTC, and our first question is like, what's the point? Why bother? But I guess they're doing this because they already have a CPU renderer, and I guess they want to take advantage of any spare CPU cycles while the GPU is cranking away. Just to kind of get that advantage. But I don't think it's something that we have any plans to do ourselves, if that's what you're asking.
Mm-hmm. No, I was curious. One of my team was actually wanting me to ask, so I had to throw it in there. But and a couple of things, like I'm just curious about, because again, I've been experimenting a little bit with GPU rendering, but so far it's been on my radar, but not something I've done heavy in-depth amount of productions with. But have you found a lot of cloud rendering services are starting to create GPU farms as well, or is everyone still kind of catching up on that?
I mean, there's definitely a bit of catch-up still happening, but we're getting requests at least once a week from some new farm, and it ranges from these sort of full service farms that will take your scene and or they've got some plugin, you click a button and it sends everything over and you get some images back, to ones where they're trying to essentially just like rent you either just the software, or rent you sort of these like cloud machines pre-configured with software that you can use within your pipeline. So yeah, I mean, all those types of different services are definitely popping up pretty quickly and showing a lot of interest in our product. And I assume that's because they're getting interest from their customer base.
That's cool. That's really cool. And I'm going to throw a few really basic questions, but I think it's good just for everyone who's not aware. I mean, what are all the packages that you guys currently support with Redshift?
So Maya 3, Studio Max, Softimage, Cinema 4D, Houdini, and Katana.
Cool. That's awesome. And I guess this is more for Rob, but going back to, I spoke to you a while back about fume effects. I've been off the radar a bit with Redshift. Like, have you guys made any progress with that? I know it's more of an afterworks, like Sydney Sadi thing that you guys are waiting on, but has there been any fume effects improvements for Redshift?
So that would probably actually be more for Nick, I would say.
Yeah, so there hasn't really been any too much direct progress there, but the conversation is still happening. And in fact, we got an email this morning from them, asking if we were interested in supporting their cache files directly, and of course we are. So yeah, I mean that definitely will happen at some point.
Yeah, that's big because Kreuzme has been very protective over his file format for the longest time. So like I'd originally been talking with ThinkBox Software, who does Krakatoa, stuff like that, and like that was one of the big hurdles that they had initially, was that they wanted to be able to bypass having to distribute and advect particles inside of a fume grid to then be able to render them. They just want to be able to like directly just read the cache files, and it took a lot of convincing before they were able to get access to that. And so I think that once he hands that over, he's pretty much handing over all support and opening his doors a bit. But yeah, I mean, for me, like as an effects TD, I think that's like the last thing holding me back from just going entirely GPU, is just the fact that once you can, especially Max, do render out volumetrics inside the same environment doing GPU acceleration, it's just like there's no reason to ever look back, really. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, in fact, we have some potential very large customers who are initially interested in Redshift simply for our the performance, for how we render volumes, because we render them very fast.
That's cool. That's really cool. I remember I was hanging out with a few of the guys from Digital Domain, and they were, I think they just finished doing a big commercial in V-Ray, and just for shits and giggles, they decided to redo it in Redshift just to kind of see what render times they would get. And they were able to get pixel perfect comparison between the two, but the difference was one V-Ray was 8 hours per frame, whereas I think it was 3 minutes per frame on Redshift, which, yeah, so for them it was just like, and this is just as I was discovering it through Alf as well. So I think we were off on a film shoot or something, and they had mentioned that. I was like, oh yeah, just that just popped up on my radar too. So I mean, I think that a lot of people are starting to kind of rethink their approach to what they're doing, just because you kind of get comfortable with these long render times. Like 8 hours is, for a lot of people, is actually like, okay, that's a good final production render time, and to get it down to minutes is just a complete game changer.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we hear those kinds of really super impressive numbers sometimes from customers. I mean, I wouldn't say that that's what you can expect on in general on every scene. And it all always depends what hardware you're comparing, which GPU versus which CPU and so on. But yeah, I mean, in some cases you can get very good speed ups.
That's cool. That's really cool. And yeah, I have like one or two more questions, and I want to try and be respectful of you guys' time, so I won't take up too much more. I know it's Friday, there's drinking to be done. So
man, there are bugs to fix, man.
you're meant to lie to me and give me the illusion that you're gonna have a life, because I've got meetings all day, and then I'm gonna be catching up on work all night. So the most fun I'll have is a glass of wine at my desk.
Or two.
Yeah, or two. Yeah, I nearly polished a whole bottle last night, which kind of gave me a good idea of like how depressing my workload is at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I think it's so cool what you guys are doing, and again, I figure just for anyone who's, I basically want to use this as like a good opportunity just to kind of shed some light on some of the benefits of Redshift and some of the key features and things like that, just because, again, I feel it's one of those renderers that it's the future where we're heading, and the more people can kind of see how they can apply it to what they're doing, the more I think that, we're all kind of on the same page. So, I mean, just for anyone who isn't aware of Redshift, like, what are some of the key features, things like that really kind of set it aside, or some of the things that you publicly can talk about that you are working on that are going to kind of put it ahead of the game?
Well, I guess, one of the things that we're about to come out with is going to be custom AOVs. There's quite a number of the large studios, especially like film studios and things, they really need to have that power. And, so we were kind of locked in before on like a certain set of AOVs, like a fixed set, which is all well and good for most people, but custom AOVs, changes the game. And so we should be bringing that to our customers probably within the next month or so. And then, after that, it's probably early next year, we'll have a shader SDK. Cool. Because, right from the beginning, people were asking, if we had one, and, because they want to write their own procedural shaders, they want to write their own BRDFs. And of course, we have our own shading language internally, but it's not very user-friendly. So we're going to clean that up and then just give it out to the world at large, and let's see what people do with it. So we're quite excited about that. Some other new cool features that we've just new, like trace sets as well. That was like another feature that some of the larger studios are asking for. So you can like basically choose, what a reflection or refraction ray can see. What else, Nick? Any things off the top of your head?
I mean, there's a whole host, I guess, of sort of individual features that we still need to support. Things, for example, in Maya, there's the XGen interactive groom splines, XGen scattering. There's a lot of these third party plugins and stuff that you might have, like, you mentioned Fume. There's a laundry list of those that, various people want supported. So we got those.
But it's at the top of the list, right?
We got the email this morning. That's so yes.
There's actually there's a couple of other features that we're working on, Alan. So one of them is ray trace subsurface scattering. Because we already have like point base, which is nice and fast and really gives you really clean subsurface scattering results. But it's not very good for like fine features. It doesn't capture that detail. So we're going to be doing that. Actually, Panos is working on that right now, and very encouraged by how that's coming along. And also directional lighting as well. So what I mean by that is, if you have an area light, the sort of effect of the light is basically like 180 degrees basically, and so what directional lighting gives you is a way to focus that light in like a specific direction, like a barn door kind of effect. So that's something that we've been working on or we've been planning to come out with for some time, and we're just starting to work on that now as well. So that's some other exciting features that are just around the corner.
And sort of like in the immediate term, our big push right now is on interactivity. So just improving the interactivity of Redshift. So while we have what is most likely the fastest final frame renderer out there, we haven't necessarily done the best job we can on that time to first pixel when you're tweaking your scene and stuff like that. And so making that faster, making it sort of smarter about, how it rescans the scene so that it doesn't have to do full scene re-exports all the time. Basically make it so that you can interactively create your scene with your render window open and just, see it render as you're working in a seamless way. That's really what we're putting a lot of effort into right now.
Yeah, that's huge. And again, the faster you can iterate, the better. Just removing the barrier of waiting to see your results, I think, is the holy grail for everyone. And that's one thing. Kevin Margo over at Blur, he'd been doing a bit of stuff like that a few years ago with other renderers, but be able to go and do real time motion capture where people might be performing on the mocap set, but you could have a tablet and be able to, as you're looking through it filming, you're actually seeing the results in 3D of what the characters or whatever it is you're capturing is doing. And yeah, again, that sort of thing I think is just really fascinating to kind of see where it's going to go. And obviously ILM X Labs are doing similar stuff to that as well, which has been pretty interesting. So doing the whole kind of real-time previs or real-time motion capture and being able to see your environments, your characters all interacting as if you're looking through that monocule or something. Monocle. I'm having a brain fart. But yeah, I mean, I think that's really fascinating to kind of see where that all goes. So yeah, I think that's really cool. And have you thought about licensing your renderers for video games or anything like that as well? Because I noticed some renderers have kind of looked into that a little bit, and obviously GPU being your territory, video games being your background, is that something that you guys would ever look into?
Yeah, I mean, we're always open to that those types of discussions. It's not something that we can really talk about right now, I guess.
That's awesome. I'll leave it there and let you guys get back to all your drinking and partying, because that's what you guys are going to do after this, right, guys?
Yep.
Thank you.
Promise.
And yeah, next time Al's in town, I'm going to try and hop down to LA, so maybe we can all meet up for a few beers somewhere.
Yeah, maybe not the same restaurant though, because it was pretty crappy last time, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the thing. The Wellsbourne across the street. The first time I went there, it was I discovered this amazing bar. It had my alcohol, it had everything, and ever since then, it didn't have my alcohol. Turns out because I drank it all, and they never stocked it again. So bit by bit, it was just all went downhill, and that the Mexican across the street wasn't that better either. So yeah, I think we'll find something just simple and has the basic booze that we need to facilitate drunkenness, and yeah, just stick to the basics. But
sounds like a plan.
Cool. Well, I'll leave it there, guys. But where would people go to find out more about Redshift and follow you guys?
Our website is www.redshift3d.com. They can check us out on Facebook, Redshift 3D, Twitter, all the usual places.
Cool. Again, I appreciate you guys taking the time out to do this. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
thanks,
nice
Allan.
talking to you.
All right, so I hope you found that episode enjoyable. And again, thanks to Rob and Nick for taking time out to chat all things Redshift and everything else in between. And next episode is going to be really awesome. I'm speaking with one of the VFX supervisors at DreamWorks, Dave Wolvord, who is responsible for a lot of the Kung Fu Pandas and How to Train Your Dragons. And in addition to that, worked on Bunny, if you remember that back in the day as a short film by Blue Sky, and Fight Club, a lot of other projects. So it's really cool, especially someone who is involved very heavily in DreamWorks, but also at job fairs and training up a lot of the people at DreamWorks. Just in general, someone who loves to give back and has a lot of insight into hiring and what the expectations are going into a big studio like DreamWorks. So I think this will be a lot of fun. There's a lot of episodes coming up that are to do with Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, and a lot of other big studios. So really exciting stuff. And that will be episode 107. So that is it for now. Like I said, if you want to get in the inner circle and get access to all the new training I'm putting out for free ahead of time, as well as be included in the career intensive and the real review and all the other stuff that's coming up, go to the show notes, which is www.allanmckay.com/106. And you'll be able to get the show notes for this episode, all the quotes, all the links, everything else. But more importantly, if you want to leave a review on the podcast, which thank you ahead of time, that would be really great. But you'll also be able to sign up to the Inner Circle, which will ensure that you're not going to be missing out on any of this great value and great content coming up. Finally, take a moment and share this episode around. It would mean the world to me if you can do that and hopefully benefit some other people. I always find that there's always these hidden gems that other people can find really valuable. So that is it for now. Rock on.